Good afternoon, or actually good morning. We're almost afternoon. Welcome to the Friday Forum on this September 30th. So glad that you can all join us. We would love to hear from you wherever you are joining us from, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter. We want to see your comments and questions because we've got a great show for you today. It's salary negotiation strategies for PR professionals. And according to PRWeek, 22% of PR professionals changed jobs this past year, and over 70% got salary increases, which is great news. We've got a terrific panel. First up, though, I'm going to bring up Jasmine Eusebio. She is a very active member of the PRSA of Silicon Valley, and she works for Highwire PR and does a lot of work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Jasmine, I'm going to tee it off to you to introduce our wonderful panel.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Karen, and thank you everybody who's tuning in. I see Gideon and Judy and Nicole are joining the chat. So I would first want to just jump off by introducing one of our first panelists, Nicole Balsam. Nicole brings over 8 years of executive search experience in her current role as an associate partner at Eastward Partners. She leads the brand and digital practice and specializes in senior level placements across marketing, communications, and strategy roles. She has delivered a successful track record across the multiple industry verticals with a foundation in digital transformation and digitally native organizations. So welcome, Nicole. We are excited to have you here.
Thanks, Jasmine. Excited to be here.
Yay. And next up, we have Judy. Judith Cushman is the president of Judith Cushman Associates. She uses her 30 years of experience in this field to provide retained search and consulting services exclusively, filling the full spectrum of communications, PR, public affairs, marketing comms, and investor relations positions. So we are really thrilled to have you, Judy. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Okay. And last but not least, we have Gideon Fiddleseed. In his current role at PRWeek, Gideon heads up all custom content activations, as well as some legacy editorial projects, including the annual salary survey, which we'll be talking about today. In his 2+ decades at PRWeek, he has played an integral role in some of the brand's most well-known properties, such as the PRWeek Awards, PR Decoded, the brand's annual conference, Best Places to Work, and the annual agency business report, as well as numerous roundtables, webcasts, and other in-person and virtual gatherings. So welcome, Gideon. And also, Gideon is the person to know if you want to be involved with these awards at PRWeek. So excited to have you here, Gideon.
Jasmine, thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be with Nicole and Judy as well. And it's interesting to do this from this perspective and not be doing your job, which is what I normally am on these webcasts. So, and also thank you for giving me a reason for actually wearing a button-down shirt. Those opportunities are rarer and rarer, so I appreciate that.
Exactly. Well, look at us. We're all here looking our best. Nicole, love your hair. Judy as well, rocking those glasses. So really excited to have everybody here and to really tee us up for this conversation. I really wanted to level set where we are coming from when we're talking about salary negotiation strategies, to really level set where are we today as an industry in terms of salary transparency, in terms of pay equity, and all of the things. And to do some of that, I wanted to quickly go over some key insights from PRWeek, from the 2022 PRWeek/PR Talent Salary Survey. So earlier this year, as many of you have known, PRWeek released its 2022 survey, where it surveyed over 900 PR professionals to learn more about how the pandemic has changed the workforce, because so much has happened in just so little time, but it feels like so long. And overall, PRWeek found that the survey, and I quote, tells a clear story of a well-adjusted and better compensated workforce that is in a powerful position to shape its own careers and in turn the industry's future. And a few key highlights that Karen kind of teased up are number one, the survey found that the median salary for communications professionals actually increased 10% from 100,000 last year to 110,000 this year. That's a 10% might not seem like a lot, but that's a pretty notable jump. And, we heard a lot about the Great Resignation, and PRWeek definitely saw this as well, with 22% of PR professionals reported that they changed jobs in the last year. And that's a 10% increase from the previous year. So again, we're seeing people shifting. And from those people that are shifting, 79% actually increased their salaries by moving to a new company or new role. And 1/3 of those that did jump actually increased their compensation by more than 25%, which is pretty significant, especially in today's day and age when, there's a recession looming, inflation, all the things. So I can see why people are looking to, make those career moves. So, I think some of these takeaways, like these numbers are pretty impressive. So I want to hear from you, Gideon, somebody who's really ingrained in this survey and how it came along. Can you tell us a little bit more about these findings and what really stood out to you the most?
Absolutely, and thank you, Jasmine. And I will try to be somewhat brief because I know that Nicole and Judy are going to have a lot of great advice for people here, so I want to let them have that opportunity. But obviously, the first thing I do want to note is obviously any survey that you do like this, it's obviously predicated on the people who take it. And while this is we had a really representative number of people take it, but obviously it's still a small amount compared to the entire industry. So the percentages are what I really look at as opposed to the numbers. And what's really interesting, the reason the 10% number is encouraging is because the year before it was 1.6%. And it makes sense because the year before the survey was done during the pandemic, where people were, quite frankly, happy to have the same salaries that they entered the year with just to have a job. So the 10% is more in line with what you were seeing before the pandemic, and that's good. That means the industry bounced back pretty well. So that's a number that obviously is important. I just wanted to give it a little bit of context. But one of the things, obviously, when I look at the survey, when I look at the salary survey, is every year one of the first things I always go to is men's salaries versus female salaries and how that's going. That's something I always pay attention to. And you know what? That gap, it's shrinking way too slowly, my opinion. Right now, based on the numbers from last year, men's median salaries are 128.3 thousand. Women's were 103,000. Okay, and now that's a 25.3 thousand gap. That's way too much, and it's smaller than it used to be, but it's still quite large. What's possibly encouraging, though, is that when you break it down by years of experience, the gap does shrink. In fact, we actually found that with some titles and some levels of experience, women were actually making more than men were. So on that level, the gap is closing. Overall, it's not. And I would say that perhaps in the earlier stages of careers, that gap is quite large. But when you get to like a CCO level or something like that, our survey seems to indicate that the salary is becoming a lot more equitable. So that's obviously encouraging. One of the other things that I also want to mention is going on job movement that always interests me. 26% of our respondents said that they are likely to change jobs in the next 12 months or so. Now, again, we're about 10 months after that survey was taken. So I'm curious if that's actually been the case. But again, that statistic shows a level of confidence among the PR workforce that they can go out there and actually get another job and a better job and a better paying job. So I think it's confident. I think there's just a lot of confidence there. And obviously that confidence will manifest itself in salary negotiations. So, again, we're actually, and this is a shameless plug that I hope you don't mind, we are going to put the 2023 salary survey out into the field within the next month or so. That's if I actually create the survey, but I think I will. But anyway, about a month or so. But and what I'm really curious about is comparing those numbers to 2022, which was a fairly positive year. Let's see how the momentum is there. That'll be really, really interesting. And I welcome all of my friends in the Silicon Valley and anyone else out there who's listening to this. By all means, take the survey and you can always email me, and I'm happy to send you the link, gideon.fiddleside@PRWeek.com. And again, I'd love as many people to take the survey as possible. But again, Jazz, that's kind of the story from my perspective. And now I want to give Nicole and Judy an opportunity to talk. So.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Gideon. And I really like the way that you framed it, that it is encouraging, right, to see, like, yeah, that we can see some of the disparities that the survey really unraveled. But at the same time, I think some of the data is encouraging to show that, hey, at the end of the day, like, we're not a perfect industry, but we are seeing, some progress made and things like that, which is great. And Judy, I want to turn it over to you. I know that you've counseled several professionals and written several blogs on salary negotiation. So I want to hear from you. Are you surprised by hearing that today's PR professionals are better compensated compared to previous years? And if so, like, why or why not?
I'm not surprised at all. And I think that this is the trend toward regular healthy increases that show up in surveys is typical and correctly indicative of the fact that the diversity, the strengths, the importance of the role has been on an upswing from almost the get-go. And I think one of the interesting challenges is to look at the content of the jobs themselves. And I was looking at, Nicole, I was looking at your background and thinking, there's so much to be said for the skill sets that have to be developed to do the work that is evolving in strategic communications. And as a result, people have to be paid for having that diversity of skill sets. And Nicole, you have those. You're a working, living example of what is needed to do the work that we're talking about now. And I also don't know that I sort of think about this as a trend. I don't know if this is something that can be found, but at the very senior levels, what you're finding is a lot of managerial capability, but not a lot of savvy about the tools. And as a result, there's a great respect for the younger, less experienced professionals from a managerial standpoint, but a very experienced group of younger professionals who can navigate all of the necessary messaging tools. And the companies and organizations are willing to pay for that. And I think that is a wonderful opportunity for people to take advantage of all the ways they understand that they have to succeed in meeting the objectives of an organization. So it's a great entry point, and it's also, I think, a way that salaries start at a higher level, because to the people who are several levels above, they recognize they are really out of it when it comes to being able to really handle the actual activities and implementation that they're trying to achieve. And they are becoming more complex, not less, and more sophisticated, not less. And exactly. I think that we're looking at that kind of a leverage for negotiating and for individuals being able to describe how their skill sets can be an asset to an organization, which gives them more of an opportunity to negotiate for what would be considered a market level, at least, compensation. And that's where the salary survey comes in. But I would say salary surveys are somewhat of a lagging indicator that from a search standpoint and from looking at what we're asked to do, we usually ask to find the people who are somewhat leading edge and excellent in what they're doing, so that we're seeing compensation levels that are what I would call a rank above what the averages are. And that leads the pack, so to speak. So you're looking at a lot of indicators that say if you are capable, if you are interested in community, if you have these tools, you are in an excellent position to take advantage of an upwardly mobile and an upwardly moving salary structure. And it's going to continue. And that sets you up as you build your career track to naturally be on a higher and higher percentage increase. So if you
Right.
start higher,
Exactly.
you can work your way up. And that's one of and the interesting thing is also with the survey is the male-female difference. I think if you look at the percentage of females who are beginning and entering versus the number of males who are beginning and entering, that weights the female side on beginning level salaries rather than mid and senior level salaries, and may account for some of the difference between that. So that's
Right.
my observation. So I'm just going to let
Exactly.
you from
Well,
here.
thank you so much, Judy. And I mean, for the purpose of time, I also want to hear from Nicole, maybe touching on some of what Judy said based on your experience. But most importantly, like Nicole, would love to hear, what do you think this data and also just what you're hearing based on your conversations with candidates? What does this data and your conversations say about today's workforce and how it's changing since pre-pandemic?
Well, thanks for all the compliments, Judy. I hope that we are moving towards a world where people do value diversity of thought and diversity of experiences, because it does, I think, in the end, add value to any organization. So from the data, I had a couple just like interesting takeaways for me. One is that if you look at the starting salaries of men and women in PR, they're almost identical. They vary by about $500. Where you start to see the gap widen is at the negotiation point of your first and second promotion. And then, as Gideon alluded to, as we get more senior, women actually end up coming out on top of men after about 11 years of experience. So not sure what that is. Maybe that's generational. Shout out to the millennials out there. But in regards to our conversation today, the fact that men are out negotiating women for their earlier career promotions, I think is just a key thing to highlight as we think about moving forward. How can we help people to have parity as they get promoted, especially in the earlier part of their career? And then the other stat that I really loved out of this data, Gideon, is that it was noted that for men and women who are either a chairman, president, CEO, or founder, men earn on average about $80,000 more than women. But my takeaway of maybe the untold story of that part of the data is that maybe that means a lot of women are out there starting their own businesses, which is actually really encouraging to me. So I hope that as the years progress, we'll see those levels start to even out as some of the women who are mid-career now ascend into agency leadership roles, and some of the people out there who started their own businesses grow and develop those.
Yeah, actually, can I make a comment, Jazz?
Yes, go for it.
Sure. Actually, that's, as usual, Nicole is right. One of the things that's also very interesting, though, is that one of the things the industry, I think, could be the most proud of is that, the glass ceiling as it comes to those positions at the top of agencies is being shattered. Because if you look at all the larger agencies in the industries right now, there are many, many more female CEOs than there ever were before. You have Gail Hyman, you have Diana Littman, Anna Maria DeSalva, Barbie Siegel, Melissa Wagner-Zorkin. I apologize to anyone I'm forgetting. I love you. I'm just forgetting your names right now. But there's a lot of women CEOs. And I think that's important because it shows women who are, at the junior levels, there is nowhere you cannot get to in an agency. And by the way, it also applies to the top communications role in house as well. So when it comes to salaries, and people who are negotiating them, you want to make sure that that really talented young women in this industry are taken care of, because they are very likely going to be the future leaders of your organizations. So, you know what you don't want to do is, as a manager, as a person who's making the decision from the business side, what you do not want to do is you do not want to lowball anybody on their earlier levels of their careers, because that will just dissuade them from staying at your company. It may even dissuade them from staying in the industry, and that doesn't do anybody any good. So I think all of these signs, and the truth of the matter is, it's impossible to have a conversation about salaries in a bubble. It's really part of an overall employment picture. So I think that while some of the things we're talking about today may not be exactly about salary negotiations and things like that, these are all very important points, because it puts everything into context, and should give people the confidence, no matter what level that they are, that, don't sell yourself short. Don't just settle for something because someone is offering it to you. As Judy was saying, very eloquently, communicators have never been more important to businesses than they are now. In fact, one of the good things, if I could say this, out of the pandemic, was I think companies really started appreciating the power of communicators more than they even did before that. Because talk about a crisis test, right? And everything else that communicators brought to the table. On the employee relations side, and social media, whatever. I mean, communicators are the central point of an organization. They touch everything. CFOs can't say that. The in-house counsel can't say that. Communicators can say that. They're really important. They're the foundation of industry. They're the foundation of companies. So don't sell yourself short. I mean, you really are an incredibly important asset to your companies and to your agencies. And when you go in for salary negotiations, you shouldn't forget it, and don't let the people who are negotiating with you forget it either, because you will have opportunities out there if they do. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now, but there you go.
I love that, Gideon. I'm going to start framing your inspirational quotes to remind me on a daily basis. But before
just say that
Nicole
said it, because people will listen to her. Me or Judy, me not so much, but I appreciate that.
Well, before we move forward, I just want to take a quick pause. We got some great comments in the chat, so keep them coming. But I do just want to read this one that says, yes, while there may be some tech gaps for more seasoned pros, it is important to note that more seasoned professionals do bring a level of experience and perspective that maybe people who are newer to the profession may not have yet. So I think my takeaway from there is, I think there's an opportunity to also focus on peer-to-peer mentorship or cross-level mentorship. I know I'm seeing it a lot at Highwire as well, as we're bringing in more Gen Z talent, with how we're really guiding our clients on social media, on what's happening externally. I think Gen Z are able to bring some of that newer perspective that maybe others have lost. So yeah, I think there's definitely value in knowledge sharing, regardless of what level you're at. But definitely there's a lot of value in different levels. And just want to say hello to everybody tuning in from across Silicon Valley, but also I see some people in Cincinnati, Michigan, and even Florida. Stay safe out there, everybody. But moving on here, I know that we've heard a lot about when you're getting ready to negotiate your salary or give a counter offer, that it's best to come prepared with market research. For anybody who's never done this, what the heck is market research? How do I get started? So to kick us off here, Judy, just super quickly, can you just walk us through some key strategies that work really well? For example, I've heard some folks say to leverage things like Glassdoor when doing market research. Others say that's not really reliable. So what are some key quick pointers that you can tell us about what methods are best recommended here?
Well, I have a real philosophy about salary negotiation, and you could tell because I think I wrote about 11 blogs on this subject. So the idea of a salary negotiation should be a professional conversation about the value of what you bring and the value that the organization brings to you. It's not about what you deserve. It's not a personal, I need this, or great. It's how I can approach helping the organization. And that puts it in a neutral spot as opposed to a contention. And it's very, very important when you do salary negotiation to recognize that you're going to be hopefully on the same side, at the same office with that person when you finish your process. So a couple of things that are really important is to really truly understand what your total compensation package, what your true salary is, and what the organization offers in light of the things that are important to you. So that is a salary negotiation is a compensation negotiation around the different points that are important and should be handled in an orderly fashion with points along the way that say, these are the important points that matter to me. I've done, and if important is to bring in the kind of information that's available about the ranges and so forth. And then the other side of this should be what a total offer could look like. So in other words, the salary, of course, is an important point. But if an organization really wants you and is listening to you, what they usually have is a potpourri, so to speak, of pieces that can fit. So they can put a salary together, and they can put other things like a salary review in 6 months, or a promise of a bonus, or some kind of special stuff. Or if you're looking at special living arrangements and so forth. So that a salary negotiation becomes a relationship negotiation around several different items that should be laid out objectively. And it's very important to keep it objective, and it's very important to keep it complete, so that when the discussion happens, both sides have a complete understanding of what is on the table. And the salary figure can be a key point in all that, and it can be adjusted. But all of these things that surround that can be what make or break the difference. And so
Thank you, Judy.
That's it. The point is to leave it open and set it up
Exactly.
so that you can adjust.
Exactly. Thank you, Judy. And I think some of that takeaway too for everybody listening is, there's more than just the salary when it comes to negotiating. You can negotiate, to Judy's point, a relocation fee if you're moving. You can negotiate maybe if your company is hybrid, you can negotiate more days working from home, like getting creative there too. So thinking beyond just that salary negotiation piece. But I want to turn it over to Nicole and Gideon. What do you think in terms of tools and resources? What are some things that folks should consider if they're interested in asking for higher compensation? What can they lean on to really prepare for that conversation? Nicole, are there any specific tools like Glassdoor, LinkedIn, other things that people should be leveraging?
Well, I think do all your research. I mean, there's information out there that's available to you. The PRWeek salary survey being one of them. So absolutely look into the industry, the information that's available from the industry, I think is probably going to be your best source. Glassdoor's okay. I find it's not always accurate. We're also seeing a trend, at least here in New York City, toward salary transparency. There's some legal and policy initiatives that are coming forward in the next few years that will hopefully allow for even more salary transparency in terms of when employers post jobs, needing to post salary ranges. Now, selfishly, the other thing I'm going to just promote that people do is develop relationships with search consultants in your space, whether it's your local market or your segment of the industry. That's why we're here. Like, we're here to help you get a job, but we're also here to provide insight and guidance. And if you have a good relationship with someone, or I'll speak for myself and the people that I work with, I'm always happy to give people a little bit of insight or guidance based on what I'm seeing out there. And then I think the other thing is I always just tell people to have a bottom line. And like, think about what's the most important thing to you, as Judy was alluding to? Is it your cash compensation? Is it the ability to work remotely? Is it the type of client you're going to be working with? And where are you flexible in that? Because ultimately you want to be able to go back to the table with either a current employer or future employer and have some boundaries for the conversation.
I like
one
that.
One quick thing. LinkedIn is subscribe to LinkedIn Jobs, because the jobs are posted with salary ranges. And if you start reading those things week by week, month by month, you will be absolutely up to date on what jobs are going for, and it's a tremendous insight into seeing where the market is shifting. And
I love that, Judy. And to Nicole's point, like, there's been so many states. I know Colorado, if you probably already started seeing on LinkedIn post, they're starting to include the salary. New York is next. I just heard that California, I think, just passed that same law as well. So a win for salary transparency, and a win for anybody who's negotiating and just wants the extra insight. What about you, Gideon? I know that you also were recently on the side of doing this for yourself. So I'm just curious, in your own career, or just from what you've seen from the survey, any other resources that you have for people who find themselves in the seat where they're looking for the next job, or even if it is an internal promotion, what are other resources that they can leverage to just prepare for that conversation?
Thank you, Jazz. And the first bit of advice I'd give everyone is, if you're going to go on a webcast, make sure you compare notes with your other co-speakers so that they don't steal what you're about to say, like Nicole just did to me. Because the first thing I was about to say is that you should definitely befriend executive recruiters. And I'm saying it as a non-executive recruiter, so I'm saying this because it's true. Now, I was going to say, Nicole would be a great example until she stole from me. No, but Nicole is a perfect example. But seriously, there's a lot of great executive recruiters out there who, frankly, they know more about what's going on salary-wise than almost anybody. And it's in their best interest, obviously, to be honest with you about everything, because, maybe there's a relationship that can work there. But that's really important. The other thing, and I wasn't paid to say this as well. I wasn't paid to say this either, but I would say, believe it or not, joining your local PRSA is actually a really good idea, because you'll meet people in your region who have the kind of jobs that either you have now or want to have. And again, those kind of conversations will be, you're guaranteed they're going to be honest about what they're making and things like that. And that's how you're going to learn about the real salary story as well. Now, the other thing that I'm going to say that I don't think was said yet is, or at least it wasn't said exactly like this, is it does play off of what Judy was talking about, making it professional. And what you need to do is, communications is all about data and analytics, right? That's how you build campaigns. That's how you do a lot of things. So if you're a communicator and you want to search for a job and you want to start talking to someone about salary, whether it's your own company or another company, you need to have data on what you've done at that company and how it helped the business, right? And that way you have an ironclad, provable story that you could share with somebody, whether it's your own company or not, that, hey, this is what I did. I'm not bragging. This is what I did, and this is how it helped the company. Because look, the bottom line is, everything comes back to the bottom line at some point, right? And so when it comes to your own salary negotiations in your own career, why should it be any different, right? Have a story to tell backed by data, and your chances of getting what you want are probably better because you're not just doing something anecdotal. You actually have something to show for it. The other thing, though, Jazz, and I'm glad you mentioned this, is that, yes, I was recently in a situation where I'd left PRWeek and then I came back. And what I did learn, and I think it's very applicable to a lot of people out there who are thinking about this, is that and I'm sorry if I sound like I'm pontificating a little bit here, but I know from recent experience how important this is. One is that it really isn't all about salary, especially now. The opportunity to work remotely has incredible salary ramifications as well, because if you live in a city like New York or another big city where commuting costs really eat into your salary, the fact that you don't may not have to do that is something you should factor in. You might be making a little bit less somewhere, but when you factor in all the money you're not spending on salary and going out to lunch as opposed to making it yourself at home because you're home, even something stupid like you don't have to get a dog sitter because you could watch the dogs yourself. I know this sounds silly, but that is a real part of this negotiation. Also, what are they going to match in terms of your 401k and other benefits as well? Some companies are incredibly generous that you will not see the benefit of that in your paycheck every week or every other week or every month. But think about that, especially young people. Young people don't think about the future like that all the time when it comes to their 401ks. Think about it. It's really, really important. And the only last thing, and I promise you this is really, really important, and I know all of you might listen out there and say, yeah, this is obvious, but you'd be surprised how not obvious it is. If you're going to leave a company and you've negotiated and you're about to leave and everything, make sure you leave the company the right way. Work as hard as you did for your last 2 or 3 or 4 weeks or however long you give them as you did your entire tenure there. Because the reason you hear the word boomerang a lot, and yes, I am a proud boomerang who came back to PRWeek, is because it happens a lot more than it ever did before. It will not happen if you left the company on bad terms. Sometimes you are going to find out that the company you left may just be a right fit for you. And sometimes you have to go somewhere else to really determine that. But you won't have that opportunity if you didn't leave it the right way. It's about being professional all the time. And I think that's really, really important. So, like I said, I look at this as more than just a salary conversation. It's really an overall career conversation. And while Judy and Nicole are probably much better to advise on some of that stuff than I am, my recent experience and all these other things, I hope are helpful to some people out there. So, yeah, Jazz, as you could see, I talk a lot, so I'll stop now.
No, that is really great advice, Gideon. And it's really interesting. I was just talking to a peer, and we're in the same level. And while they are making less salary compared to me and maybe others, they're getting paid a lot more when it comes to those bonuses. Like I know this month they just got like a $5,000 bonus for a campaign that they did. So a lot of those bonuses, like they said, by the end of the year, they're on track to get almost like $20,000 in extra bonuses, which I think like those are other things to consider. While the salary might be a little bit lower than you were anticipating, you can still ask for other things that will, again, as we talk about that total compensation package, will bring you up to what you personally feel comfortable with taking. But just to recap on what we've talked about, I think some key resources for people to leverage, definitely connect with people like Nicole, add her on LinkedIn, and look for other people in your market. If there's somebody in Silicon Valley, if you're in Cincinnati, Michigan, look for those people that understand the market, the agencies, the corporations around there who can really give you some of that guidance. Download PRWeek salary survey, get tuned in when the 2023 one comes out, because that really shows you like a barometer of at least a good sense. And then from talking to people like Nicole, you'll really get down to the nitty gritty. But now that we've talked about some key tools and resources, I really want to talk about that actual conversation, at least for me personally, and from what I've seen with some of the peers that I've been connecting with. I think that's what makes people hesitate the most. It seems so scary. Like, what if I ask and they take away my offer, or they laugh at me, or whatever people are thinking? Especially people who are first gen or who just have never negotiated their salaries before. I just want to give people a little glimpse on what is that conversation actually like? What can they anticipate when they are talking to a recruiter or hiring manager about their total comp package? So I want to turn it over to Judy. Let's say there's somebody that's listening who has never, ever negotiated their salary before, and they just got a job offer. They've done all the research. They feel really prepared to ask for a higher compensation package. What can you tell us about what they can expect going into this conversation? And can you walk us a little bit through what that may look like?
Sure. Okay, for a younger professional, one of the points you've made is they've done their homework. I'm gonna really emphasize that in light of all the things we've said, and say one of the things that will help that person feel confident is that they know what matters to them, they know their bottom line, they know what they can, and they feel confident that they really can contribute to this new organization and that they would like to. But they also need to be confident, and this is like in any exchange, you have to be confident you can say no. Is really, I want to underscore that. If the person says, these are my non-negotiables, I've thought about it, my salary should be this in this range, or my total compensation should be in this range, as much as I think that I can contribute to that organization, if they don't agree with the things that are core to what I want, I have to be able to say no. That is a powerful feeling, and that is one of the key things that will help a person get through a negotiation, because they have that kind of confidence in what they know, what that they need. And the way that they can have a conversation, first of all, I'm very much against somebody saying to that individual, what is your salary? And then giving a figure on top of the salary. I am about compensation. And we've talked about it. All of us talked about what compensation is and what it can be. So when the person gets into the interview and they say, well, and I think to make it less challenging and less hard, is the person can summarize where they are and say, I am very, very excited to have this conversation with you. I really feel, based on our conversation and our prior discussions, that this would be a wonderful change for me, and I would be able to contribute in a significant way that would be very, very good for the firm. So they set the framework for success, and they indicate that they really want this to work. And then that takes the anger or the concern or all of the tension down a notch, because now it's a matter of, okay, we both agree that this is something that should happen. Let's see if we can now put the details together. At that point, if the person has said already to that organization, this is my, at this point, this is roughly my compensation and so forth. There's been some discussion about what that person, the individual, is looking for. They've said, I'm looking in the range of, I'm looking for these kinds of benefits. And at which point they all know now that they want this to work. And so now the person making the offer can say, well, I've listened to all your things. We can offer this much, this much, this much, and this much. And then if the individual said, well, I had thought that an appropriate, with the research I've done and looking at the other elements, that the package that I was looking for should have these components to it, and and should, and then at that point they can discuss whether indeed the package can be adjusted, because at that point we're trying to get the match, we're trying to get all the pieces to work. We're not trying to say yes or no. And so that allows for a give and a take, at which point the individual may say, I was looking in this, roughly in this range, or with this total, with this benefit, and so forth. And then the other person can say, well, we have a range that we have to live with, but we have these other elements that can add to the picture. And we are flexible around some of the things that are perhaps intangibles. I can arrange for your work-life balance. I can arrange for more vacation time. I can arrange, and here's another one, I can arrange for a salary review in 6 months. And I can tell you that the average percentage increase around that is such and such. And so your conversation becomes a conversation, not a confrontation. It becomes an exchange back and forth around these different pieces. And that can lead to a great success. And if it turns out that it's just not what the individual wants after this thorough discussion, that individual knows that they have the ability to say no. They feel confident that if they just are too far apart, it's not going to be a negative. They can just say, we just can't seem to sort of come to the right figures for me. So I really appreciate the time, but it's just not going to be a fit for me. And
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think like being confident in what you know you want and that you feel comfortable having, and feeling confident to say, actually, no, like I really am set on this number or on this total comp package, so I might go for the other offer that I have on hand. So I think love that advice. Nicole, I want to hear from you as well. What advice do you have for people that may be nervous about having this conversation, or just other key pieces of advice you have for people around this?
Well, Judy, I really agree with your idea of framing the conversation up front as, I really want to get to a great place at the end of this conversation, so that you immediately are sort of taking the air out of any tension that could be in the room going into it. At the end of the day, I always like to remind people that for yourself as well as for the organization, everyone wants this to work. If you've gotten to the point of we're talking about compensation and bringing you on board onto the team, or talking about a promotion at the organization you're already at, people, like, nobody wants to come out of that conversation with a negative outcome. So go into it confidently, knowing that you wouldn't be in the position of having this conversation at all if you weren't qualified to be there. And I would say the other like major thing that I remind people is, this is a professional conversation. You know, you can have a relationship with these people outside of the context of this conversation, but at the end of the day, you're the best advocate for yourself, and you won't get anything that you don't ask for. So I'm a big fan of transparency. I think being upfront with people about what you want, or what the needs of the reality of your life is, can go a long way. Just, you know, I've seen it happen with people I know. For example, oh, I really, really want this job. I'm so committed to it. And we've gotten all the way down to the end. I know that they can't break their compensation bands for me at this level. I have childcare needs, and unfortunately this salary is not going to be able to cover that expense for me, but I really want to take this job. As Judy alluded to, I would encourage people to be upfront about communicating that, because the company may come back to you and say, oh, we actually have an FSA account that you can use towards childcare spending that you might not have known about before. Or maybe they can give you a one-time health and wellness bonus. There are creative solutions to a lot of challenges. So I would encourage people to put their needs out there, because you might be surprised at what comes back.
I like the way that you're framing it, Nicole. I think it's more positive, right? Like looking at it as, you know, it's a conversation. We both want to come up to an agreement. You've gone through the entire interview process, and nobody's just going to be like, oh, well, I guess this is a waste of 2-3 weeks or however long, you know? So I really like that. I think it, hopefully for anybody listening, it makes you like feel less pressure about going into the conversation. Start with a positive introduction. Gideon, do you have anything to add here, maybe from your experience or just from what you're hearing?
You know, this is a situation where you know what you know and know what you don't know. I would be a fool to start to step on what Nicole and Judy just said, or a lot more experience in offering counsel on this. So I will just say that they both gave terrific advice. And the only thing I'll add is that if you're a younger professional who does not have the responsibilities of a family or anything like that, um, I really, really would advise that salary not be a determining factor in a role that you take. I mean, I'm not telling you to take less money to go somewhere else, but when you're at that level, and you don't have the responsibilities. You know what? Look at the job itself and where it could lead you to, both salary wise and with your career. And don't quibble with the person or with yourself over what's really not a huge amount of money that's not going to really change your life one way or the other. I mean, I think a lot of people make mistakes that they see a huge salary raise in a job and they get so caught up in that and they don't really think about, is this the right job for me? Am I leaving my company for the right reasons? Maybe I'm better off getting a little bit smaller of a raise at my current company, and the trajectory for my career is better than I would be to go somewhere else and make more money, and my career is going to hit a wall. So if you're a younger professional, I think salary is. I'm not going to sit here and be naive and say it's not important. I know it's important, but as Judy and Nicole were saying, that is not where these conversations should start. And the truth is, if you're having conversations with somebody about a new job, it's very, very unlikely you're going to be making less money at that new place. That's not the way things work. You probably will make more, but don't get too caught up in it and if you take that out of the equation and you just focus on the job itself and what you could bring to it and it could bring to you, I think these conversations are a lot easier. I think you'll find a lot of times, especially at the younger levels, these salary things kind of work themselves out. They really do. I mean, I really believe that. I think as you get more experience and you have other considerations, yeah, there are different things to factor. When you're younger, I wouldn't even focus on salary so much. I mean, it's not the most important thing. It really, really isn't. Would you agree with that, Nicole and Judy? I mean, I think that's the truth.
I think you made really good points, Gideon. And the other thing that it reminded me of too is that if you're in a conversation like this and you find that you're just on two completely separate pages, it's not going to be the right situation for you long term anyway. It's not a culture fit for you if they aren't willing to value you the way that you see yourself being valued. Obviously, this is like within reason, because a lot of times at the end of this negotiation, if both people walk away feeling like they gave a little bit, that's a positive outcome to me.
Absolutely. Like in baseball, they say the best trades are the ones that help both sides. Now, of course, either side doesn't care about the other side as much in baseball, but it's the truth. Both sides should be happy with the outcome, and then you're at the right place.
Yeah.
I'm done, Jazz. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Judy. Go ahead.
No, I just have one rule, and I think this is a really important rule. If you get a call from somebody who represents a recruiter or whatever, and you start a first conversation and they say, "What is your salary?" That's like a huge red flag. And what that person is doing is recruiting based on a salary range that this person has, and they're doing a black and white kind of situation. So my advice whenever people are getting started in their careers and get those kind of calls is they find the answer that works for them. And it's not to answer that question. It's to talk about the fact that, first of all, if they're not looking, they have to say, "I'm not looking," and thank you, goodbye. I don't want to. But if they're somewhat intrigued, what they really have to say is, "I am not able to give you a salary range. I'm not able to give you a salary. I can give you a rough indication of what my current range is, but there are so many factors in this picture that I cannot give you a figure." And I want to alert people who are not terribly experienced. The kinds of people who are recruiting who ask that question are people that usually write that down somewhere. We make a report, and that trails with you while that makes its way throughout the entire organization. Don't do it. Don't get caught in that, because what will happen is if the time comes that this gets serious, they're going to go back to you and say, well, you were making X, so we're talking about a range of Y. And the point of the matter is, they should never use that figure, and you should never give it. So to know. So I want to pass.
Can I play
Thank you so
devil's
much.
advocate on that for a second?
Yes, go, Nicole. We want to hear all perspectives.
I don't think anyone should ever ask you, what do you make? In fact, here in New York City, that's illegal. So if anyone ever does, recruiter or employer, you're entitled not to answer that. We are allowed to ask, what are you looking for? And I actually think that it's important to give us an indication. And I'm going to speak regardless of level, but actually particularly as you get more senior in your career, when the compensation packages become a lot more complicated and may include factors like equity and other long-term incentives. If you have cash compensation needs because you have a life and a mortgage and whatever else, it's really important for me to know that up front, because I may have a client that could be an absolute home run for you in your career, but they may have real financial constraints given sort of their funding or where they are in the growth stage of their organization. And I just don't want to waste your time or theirs and have everyone fall in love with each other to find out that we're a million miles apart on the cash compensation component. So I think you should give some thought to where you're willing to flex. Yes, but don't feel obligated to tell people what you make today.
Yes. Well, that's a great point, Nicole. And I know we're down to the wire. So before we wrap, I do want to take this question from the chat from Gary. And I want to make it to you, Nicole. So he is asking, what is your view on a candidate asking about salary range in an initial conversation as a way to manage expectations and avoid wasted time, which I believe is what you were alluding to. He also mentioned historically that has been frowned upon, but it appears that it's common more now today. So he kind of wants to know your perspective a little bit here.
Yeah, great question, Gary. I would say I still don't like it when people ask me for a comp range prior to getting on the phone with me, because I see our relationship as more than transactional. It's more than just this one opportunity. So if you ask me for a comp range for this role only, I'm going to take it as you only want to talk to me about this role only, and I'm not going to call you about future roles that you could be right for. So it's always good to take those calls with your recruiter. I think asking for a salary range can go one of two ways. It's appropriate in certain situations, perhaps. The only caveat I have is that I've seen it hundreds of times that a client doesn't have a firm range, particularly if it's a brand new job within the organization, or they're looking for a kind of skill set that isn't present on the team. They might be flexible. I have clients sometimes come to me and say, I'm looking for anyone with between 10 and 25 years of experience, depending on who we find out there. So unfortunately, the answer is yes and no. I think you can ask, but you can be prepared for an answer of, my clients or this organization for this role is flexible depending on the candidate's level of experience.
Yeah, I would say that I've seen clients flex enormously. I mean, I think of one client that was off an entire range, thousands and thousands of dollars, and were thrilled to pay way more because it was the right person. So I do agree that there are ways to work that if there's good communication between the recruiter, between the individual and the client. I do see that. And I see that the value of a recruiting person is to really help an organization get to the right place and get to the right person. So that's a plug for
Yes.
what recruiters can do.
Well, thank you so much. We are at the top of the hour, so I just want to wrap up by thanking all of our speakers today, everybody who tuned in on the chat. As you heard, a lot of these folks are open to connecting with you on LinkedIn to help you. There's a lot of resources. Connect with Gideon if you want to participate in that next salary survey, or if you just want to get some insight for your own knowledge. But thank you so much, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your Friday. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.